right, let's talk about the hand and movements of the hand. For this class, we're only going to be measuring finger flexion and extension, and abduction and adduction. I do want you to know the movements of the thumb. So your thumb, you have flexion, extension, and then you have abduction, adduction, and then opposition. We're not going to measure those. We're only going to measure the first finger. So I'm going to come to my sweet dear mother-in-law. And we are going to measure, we're first going to observe her movement just of this first finger. So can you kind of make a fist in there? Good. And then come all the way back out with your fingers as far as you can. And relax right here in the middle. So we're going to do our measurements. She's got good flexion and extension of that first finger. We are going to measure the MCP joint, flexion and extension of the first finger. So the MCP joint is our access point. The stable arm comes along that metacarpal, and I'm going to have her bring her her fingers all the way in. I'm going to follow that first phalange as much as you can. So she has about 60 degrees, from 0 to 60 degrees of MCP finger flexion. If I start here and bring it all the way back out, following my movable arm around to 0, she's got all the way back to 0 for her MCP extension, and then maybe even a little hyperextension of about almost 30 degrees. So from 0 to 30 degrees, hyperextension of the MCP. Then I'm going to have her relax her hand here right at the middle again. I'm going to come up and measure that proximal interphalangeal joint. I'm going to observe her movement, so can you just bend your finger in and come all the way back out? I'm stabilizing here. I don't want this MCP joint just moving, just that proximal IP joint. So I'm going to have you move your finger again and all the way out again. Then I'm going to line up my access point with that joint. My stable arm goes along that phalange there, movable arm with the distal phalange, and I'm going to stabilize that MCP joint and have her just flex her finger again. It's a little hard to tell with the worn out goniometer. She has 90 degrees of proximal interphalangeal flexion. If I'm lining it up again and I bring her finger all the way out, aligning with that phalange, she's got 0 degrees of PIP extension, proximal interphalangeal extension. We do the same thing for the distal interphalangeal joint. So I'm going to stabilize that more proximal joint. I'm going to have her just flex the tip of her finger and then bring it all the way back out. So flex it again and all the way back out. I'm going to line up the access with that movable joint. Stable arm stays down with that middle phalange there. And then I'm going to have her do that same movement, trying to block that proximal phalange IP joint. And she's got about 40 degrees of DIP flexion. Oops, sorry, let's do the extension. Come here again. Go all the way back to 0. So blocking that joint, come into flexion. So about 40 degrees of flexion, and then come all the way back out, oops, to extension. 0 degrees of extension.